Good morning. My name is Michael Lodato, excuse me, with the Town of Hempstead Industrial Development Agency. I'm the Deputy Executive Director, and I'm accompanied by the CEO, Frederick E. Parola. We're opening a public hearing today for Rock 50 LLC. I will now submit the notice of public hearing into the transcript from the stenographer. We're also being recorded for our YouTube channel. If you'd like to be heard, please step up to the microphone, state your name clearly for the stenographer, and we can get you on record. Thank you.
My name is George Peters from the law firms Tillman, Ballin, Adler & Hyman, 90 Merrick Avenue, East Meadow, New York, 11554. On behalf of applicant Rock 50 LLC, here to hear any comments the public may have on the application. Thank you kindly.
Good morning. I'm A. Thomas Levin. I'm the village attorney for the Village of Rockville Center. I have some comments. I don't know if you want to take those now or if you're doing anything else preliminarily.
No, go ahead. Please.
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to start by stating that the village clearly welcomes the new owners of the property and the renewed use of the building at 50 North Park Avenue. But the village has a number of concerns about statements which were made in the application and the IDA documents on which the hearing is based, and we want to make sure that the information in the record is accurate. The documents indicate a proposed office building use for the property, but some other sources have given indications that some or all of the building may be converted to medical office use. Medical office uses have different zoning requirements in the village than office uses do. If there are any medical uses being intended, there are zoning issues implicated in the introduction of this new use, and the IDA should be aware of the possible future zoning issues in doing that. According to the village records, this building, which is fairly old, is a legal non-conforming building with respect to height and setbacks. So I'm sure, Mr. Hurl, I'm sure you know, that legal non-conforming means that the building was lawful at one time before the current village zoning regulations went into effect, and it's therefore, I hate this term, grandfathered, and it can continue with those nonconformities in perpetuity, so long as the building isn't altered or enlarged, or the use isn't altered or enlarged. That would implicate other issues. The current village code requires one off-street parking space for every 200 square feet of gross floor area, excluding an unoccupied basement. The building department advises me that this translates to, if the building were built today, 251 required parking spaces. There are actually 73. Now, while we know the building, since its inception, was non-conforming as to height and setback, we're not yet sure exactly what the development over the years was of the various parking requirements, and whether there is certainly some legal nonconformity. Whether it's entirely legally nonconforming on parking, we don't know. But should any part of the building be converted to medical office, and the off-street parking requirements are different. The medical office requirement is one space for every 150 square feet of floor area, as opposed to the 200 square feet for a commercial office. And furthermore, so any change to medical office is going to implicate parking issues. Furthermore, if more than 40% of the building is changed to medical use, the grandfathering of the parking deficiency is lost entirely. Because under the village code, 335 parking spaces would then be required, and the village has a process called a substantial occupancy permit, which would be needed from the Board of Appeals, and a site plan review from the Planning Board. So the reason I bring this up is if to any extent the IDA, proposed IDA financing is tied in any way to the use of the building and includes a projection for medical use of the building, there are going to be issues with that in the future, because we will tell you that medical use is not assured. There are also some misstatements in the application and the documentation regarding the property tax status, which I think is a little muddled. The application and the economic analysis by, is it Camoin? Is that the pronunciation?
Moin, yes.
Is predicated on the property being presently tax exempt. It's not. The property, the tax exempt status was lost when the property was sold by the former tax exempt owner. So according to the county assessment website, the property was sold February 1, 2021 for $5.2 million, apparently as part of the bankruptcy case involving the Diocese of Rockville Centre. For reasons that are not known to the village, we did not receive the usual RP 5217 form that municipalities get to notify the sale of the property so it could be placed back on the tax rolls. Then the property appears, according to the county records, to again have been sold to Rock 50 LLC for a reported $9.5 million. And again, the village did not get 5217 forms. This is what the county website shows. That's all I can tell you. The village learned of that sale only last November, and only inadvertently because Rock 50 LLC applied for a utility account. The village has its own electric utility, and in doing so advised the village that it was now the property owner. So the property is on the village tax rolls, and the documents on the website include a statement that the village property assessed value of $903,025 is 50 years out of date. That is not, and never has been, the village's assessed valuation. That's the county assessed valuation. The village, as you may know, does its own assessing. We have different assessed valuations, we have a different equalization rate, and we have different tax rates. So the county AV, the assessed value for the county indicates a fair market value of about $9 million, not so far off from the last reported sales price. But the village has the property assessed, and we have a different ratio. Our county uses 1%, we use 1.13. And the village has the property at an assessed valuation this year, not 50 years old, of $118,650, which indicates a fair market value of $10.5 million. So we just want to make sure that this is understood. I think somebody needs to go back and look at those numbers again. Also, for the reason I'm about to explain, the fiscal impact analysis shows that the proposed pilot payments would be substantially more than the zero tax paid by the exempt property. That's pretty obvious. But the property isn't exempt, and it's on the tax rolls, and a proper analysis would show the current taxes on the non-exempt property compared to what it would be to give a pilot, not a zero tax compared to the pilot. And if you did that, it would show that the pilot payments are not substantially more than the current tax derived from the property, they're substantially less. We suggest that you do that. The village's analysis shows that on the current village tax rate and the current village assessed valuation, the village property tax will be $65,633. We're about to do our budget. There may be some adjustment in that tax rate, but it's not going to be substantial. The school property tax, based on the current school tax rates and the county assessed valuation, not the village, is $487,884, and then, of course, there are town, county, and some special district taxes, which are much smaller. So when the renovation of the building is complete, it surely will be reassessed by the county and the village, and surely at much higher values. But the draft pilot analysis estimates total taxes on the building without a pilot that are only slightly higher than the present taxes on a building that's described as being 50 years old and decrepit. So that's not likely to be true. So I think somebody ought to take a look at that again. Also, the analysis of the pilot by Cameron starts at a $294,000 some odd payment in year one, and then $800,000 in year 20. And I think these figures are not in accord with reality. If you look at the actual taxes and the projected taxes, I think, my guess is that Camoin has calculated the village tax revenues based on the county's assessed value, not the village's assessed value. Because the projection they have is at the end of the pilot, the taxes will be less than they are today, which is highly unlikely. And they project pilot payments to the village that we think are grossly inflated because they're using the wrong values. So somebody needs to go back and redo the math. The last point we have is the projection of jobs to be located at the site is highly speculative. Other than numbers inserted into a list, there isn't any explanation of how those projections were derived, whether these are new jobs, or they jobs moved from other locations in or outside the town or the village. There's no indication whether any preference could be given to village residents in filling those jobs, which would justify to some extent, the fiscal impact on the village resulting from the property tax exemption that's proposed. And there isn't any clear indication what happens to the IDA benefits if the jobs don't materialize. So as I started my presentation, the village welcomes this project. We just don't want to see it bestow great financial rewards for the developer out of the pocketbooks of village taxpayers. And we're asking that the IDA reconsider the scope and extent of the benefits that are going to be conferred on the developer and go back and check the math. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can answer questions, I hope, if there are any. Otherwise, my remarks are concluded.
I'm gonna say anything.
Go ahead, sure.
Within the document that you referenced, with the village having an amount of $353,302, I believe was the amount, the abstract is what we call it. I had reached out to the village personally, and that's the figure they gave me.
What does that figure represent?
That represents what the taxes would be this current year.
The village taxes?
That's what I had got verbally over the phone, yes.
Well, here is what I have from the village tax office. The parcel has an AV of $118,650 on the village's 22-23 tentative roll. Our equalization is 1.13. That equals a fair market value of $10,500. The village's tax rate is currently $55.31764 per $100 of assessed valuation. And just find the page where they did the math for me. I'm not finding that page now, but that's the number that they did the math calculating that out, comes to $64,000 a year. This is just math, and obviously it can be reviewed and see what the numbers are, but the assessed valuation that this is based on is for the village, because we use a different formula, is vastly different from that of the county. So I suspect those numbers come, if you use the county's assessed value, you come up with those, and against the village's tax rate, you come up with numbers like that. But my math doesn't come up that way using the village numbers.
Okay. I'll have to review that again.
It's all, I mean, this isn't, it's math. Sorry, it's somebody can just sit down and get a calculator and do the math. We'd be happy to take that much, by the way.
Yes, of course.
I think that was all I had to say so far. I think I have the tax bills that I printed off. Let's see. No.
I don't know if there have been any actual village tax bills.
Yeah, usually we use a internal
Yeah.
system to pull down the tax bills, and then we use land record viewer. Wait a minute. That wouldn't be for the village, obviously.
No, that's the problem, the village numbers don't show up on the land record viewer.
Yeah, the most recent tax bills I have for school and general are 0.
Well, it's because the property's been exempt, and now it's not.
Right, I understand.
It has a new assessed valuation in the village, I don't know what the county's doing. But we know it has one for the village because we have our roll for the coming tax year. Taxes have not been set nor levied, so I can't tell you what that number is for sure.
Okay.
Using last year's tax rate and this year's AV, you come up with very different numbers.
Okay, we'll have to review that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thanks. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Mrs. Gary?
Do you also plan to hear from the developer?
Only if he wants to.
My name is Catherine Gary. I'm a resident here in the village of Rockville Center, a long-time resident. I am in opposition to the request by Rockfile for a pilot tax break and for the other tax benefits they are seeking. As a dedicated citizen who has been following and studying the purpose and impact of this type of business-oriented tax favoritism, I call upon the RDA board to reject this proposal for the following reasons. Reason one, I suggest there is a dangerous hidden agenda behind all these so-called pilot tax breaks. The hidden agenda is to transfer the tax burden of businesses onto the shoulders of the homeowners. I object to that agenda. The real estate pirates, they get the tax breaks, and the homeowners are forced to make up the difference between the business's full tax burden and the small payment they would make. Over the 20-year period of the pilot, the loss of taxes to the village goes into millions of dollars. Millions of dollars that the homeowners are being cheated out of under these so-called pilots. This is grossly unacceptable. Reason two, Nassau County, the town of Hempstead, and the village of Rockville Center are all wealthy areas. We and they are not in need of subsidized economic development. Rockville Center has hardly any vacant buildings and is financially and economically stable. Thus, it is counterproductive to be giving out these pilots, which will create nothing but a future pattern of aiding and abetting huge real estate entities to seek profits on the backs of the homeowners. I say that businesses need to pay their full taxes. If Rock 5 cannot afford to pay their own way, they shouldn't have purchased this property. They should have planned it better so they could do something that they can afford. And if this company is suddenly threatening to leave the property unused and vacant as a way of intimidating the village or IDA into accepting their demand for tax relief, they should be charged with criminal intent to defraud the public. Now, I understand that certain individuals, as reflected in the local Herald newspaper, they dare to advocate that the village should support this pilot on the basis that the small payments be paid in lieu of taxes is more than what the village was receiving from this building when it was owned by the nonprofit church organization. I suggest that the reasoning represents incorrect thinking and is totally contrary to our tax code. A business needs to pay its full taxes, and those taxes are not to be determined on the basis of what the prior owner paid. To allow this type of erroneous thinking is to rob the taxpayers of millions, while they set a very dangerous precedent because it is akin to aiding, abetting, and encouraging businesses to deliberately purchase land or buildings with the full intent and purpose of intimidating and threatening the village and or the IDA to grant such tax breaks in areas such as Rockville Center and the town of Hempstead, in which there are already existing sufficient and stable economic developments. Such intimidation and bad faith must be declared illegal and must not be allowed to be rewarded with these wrongfully demanded governmental subsidies. I sincerely doubt that this proposal will be good for Rockville Center. It does not provide enough parking for the couple hundred employees they claim they will be hiring. And the news media continues to say that new office buildings are no longer needed because so many people will continue to work from home. Therefore, I call upon you to reject this faulty proposal, and thank you for your attention to these very serious issues.
Thank you, Mrs. Garrett. Thank you, Mrs. Garrett. Would anyone else like to be heard? If so, please just come up and state your name and,
I'll wait to see if there's anybody else.
okay.
Good morning, my name is Daniel Baker, so Tillman, Ballin, Adler, and Hyman, 90 Merrick Avenue, East Meadow, New York, 11554, attorney for the applicant. I would just like to address some of the comments made by Mr. Levin. First and foremost, we're happy to talk to the village after today, at any time, to go through things and discuss the proposed use and so forth, and so on. What I will do is go through a couple of the comments that Mr. Levin made and try to answer them. First and foremost, we've represented certainly in our application and in our first presentation to the IDA, all of the specifics of the acquisition of this property, the purchase price and so forth. As to the RP 5217s, I can't say, and I was not involved in the transaction to acquire the property, but that would be something that would absolutely be required to be filed by a purchaser at the time of closing. What the county clerk does with them and how they push them along, I can't speak to that, so I don't know why they were never presented. But we have